This is Glenn Hauser with World of Radio, 2240. World of Radio is a listener-supported public service program about communications around the world, above all shortwave. On this edition, recorded April 25th, Algeria, Antarctica, Australia, Canada, China, Costa Rica, Cuba, Indonesia, Iran, Italy, Lithuania, Malaysia, Myanmar, Netherlands, North America, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Slovakia, South Carolina, Turkey, UK, USA, Vanuatu, and the Propagation Outlook. Standard disclaimer. Manuel Mendez in Spain ran across an English broadcast from Ifriqiya FM, the Algerian service on shortwave. This was between 0635 and 0645 UT approximately, both on April 23rd and 24th on 17600. So I made a point of checking that the next night, and was pleased to find that 17600 was still propagating across the night side. However, there was no English on that date. They were in French and Arabic. Manuel also found the same. There's a parallel frequency 15160 during that hour. He was hearing it there too, but not in English, while I was getting China. Anyhow, it might be productive to keep checking at 0635 UT for some English from Algeria, and there could be some others times in the day we don't know about. If you do run across English, do let us know. Or had any up-to-date scheduling info from LRA 36 Antarctica, 15475.98, reduced carrier USB. But I checked on Saturday, April 20th, and found it already on the air earlier than before at 2110 UT, but it was no longer audible by 2141. I later saw a report from Italy that it had been heard on Wednesday, April 17th, according to Roberto Pavanello in the PlayDX group. It was at 2040 UT, so I checked the following Wednesday, April 24th, not until 2209, but I was not getting it via the remotes. Months ago, they did have a Wednesday airing as well as on Saturday. I rarely hear anything beyond the USA, Canada, or Mexico on the 10-meter ham beacon band, but April 21st at midnight 37 on 28266 CW, I was hearing VK4RST. That's a 10-watt propagation beacon at St. George in southwest Queensland. The distance, 13.8 megameters from me, a pipeline from Queensland. Via Gerald T. Pollard, a story from CBC News, April 21st, about a non-CBC station. CKUA, Canada's first public broadcaster, needs to raise $3 megadollars by September 30th to continue operating. That's what used to be on 580 in Edmonton, but with FM relays across the province. Much more to the story. But the bottom line is they're running out of funding. Frank Bast, F4LKC, reports hearing a couple of Chinese regional stations signing on in their mornings on 18 April. At 2133, 7225 Sichuan Ethnic Radio in Chengdu. And at 2245 on 7210, Yunnan Minority Radio in Kunming. Both of them had IDs at the top of the following hour. The IRCA group, Jean Burnell of Halifax, Nova Scotia, says, I was in Costa Rica in late January and early February. Over 5 days, I made 116 5 to 8 minute recordings, and I've been working through them. I've been adding to a table I have been putting online at realdx.online. From Newfoundland, where IDX, stations from Central America are extremely rare. I've listened to every frequency for which WRTH lists a Costa Rican station. In the table, I've included all of the stations, even if I never heard them. I suspect most of the unheard ones are really off the air permanently. More audio clips are to be added. Not only in Cuban shortwave broadcasting, but in spy numbers transmissions, there have been lots of disruptions lately. Rick Barton in Arizona keeps a close ear for the spy numbers and reports as follows. As of April 21st, 11635 at 2130 in progress. He had not heard that since March 7th. 5-digit number blocks alternating with digital data text transfers. And it was going on and off until closing at 2200. And then also on April 21st on 10715 at 2203, it suddenly popped up on this channel, which he started checking at 2200. Again, the 5-digit number blocks and digital data text transfers. This one ran past 2300 unlike before, went to open carrier at 2320 and stayed on until 2345. He says, note the usual numbers transmissions the following morning did not materialize on 11435, 11530, or 11635. We mentioned last week from Asilomar State Beach, California, Ron Howard said RRI Nabiri, Indonesia, 7289.93, had not been heard since the end of Ramadan. Finally, he was hearing it again on April 21st, tuned in at 0757 and tuned out at 0920 after a brief absence. And they were back to their pre-Ramadan format of mostly non-stop songs. But there are normal Islamic prayers at certain times of sundown. On April 23rd, Zacharias Yangas in Greece was also hearing Nabiri, and they were still going at 0933, in fact, past 1000 when Chinese interference started, as he heard via remote in the Philippines. Iran Non, from a BBC press release via AIB, BBC World Service has submitted an updated complaint to its urgent appeal filed with the UN and requested urgent action. Complaint follows from the stabbing of Iran international journalist Pouria Zarati in London on 29 March by assailants believed to have been recruited by Iran. This event, combined with threats made to journalists working for BBC News Persian, demonstrates the real danger posed by Iran to media freedom. From AFP via Mike Cooper, journalists at Italy's RAI public broadcaster announced a 24-hour walkout next month, citing concerns over politicization under Giorgia Meloni's hard-right government. The trade union Uzigrai called the strike from May 6th to 7th. It cited numerous issues, including staff shortages and contract issues, but in first place was the suffocating control over journalistic work, with the attempt to reduce RAI to a megaphone for the government. A new medium wave station has appeared in Europe, provoking considerable interest. At mediumwave.info, Idun Ritz reported on April 17th that there are rumors of a new radio in Lithuania on 666, supposed to go on the air that week, transmitting from a computer in the Netherlands, just like the station on 1557 Radio Lenta. Then at Medium Wave List, Mauro Ritola heard it on April 18th at 1349, identifying as Radio Signal. It was also heard testing the evening of April 18th in Bedford, UK, by David Thorpe. Via BCDX, also reported by Rumen Pankov in Bulgaria, medium wave 666 radio signal in Russian, April 19th until closing down at 23 UT, along with the other Lithuanian transmitters on 1386 relaying Ukraine and 1557 Radio Nasha Lenta until 2306. Then David Kernick of Interval Signals Online says the new station on 666 was observed at 0710 UT April 19th, ending every news report with their website URL, radiosignal.news. The site includes a live audio stream. It says it's an information radio station. But it's about events in Belarus, so is it in Russian or Belarusian? Igor in Russia replies, the internet site, radiosignal.news, is in Russian only, similar in style to Radio Lenta. Graham Stoker in the British DX Club says it's 25 kilowatts per medium wave list, transmitter location Kaunas and Sitkunai. Not sure if that's correct. They're broadcasting interesting content, which, with the help of Google Translate, they were clearly targeting Belarus folks, pointing out how the grass is greener elsewhere. By the way, I'm wondering why Belarus is never referred to anymore as White Russia. Alan Pennington made this recording 18 April, around 23 UT.
Radio Signal. Подробно о важном. Прямо сейчас. Подробно о важном. Минск во всеоружии. Минобороны закупит еще одну партию тактических беспилотников.
Upon Asilomar State Beach, California, Ron Howard reports outstanding reception of Malaysia's only shortwave station, YFM WAI, April 19th from 12:30 to 13:15, without the usual adjacent interference, including an ID at 1312. also had good reception the next day, April 20th, at 12:28. Poetry of the month, apparently, called Pantun Bulan, non-stop chanting or poem. Zacharias Yangas in Greece was also listening to this on April 23rd, also via the FM stream of the station and via the remote in Jakarta. They had IDs not as YFM but as Radio Kayan Miri or Miri FM, apparently another network in Malaysia. These were at 0716 and 719 UT. Observations of Myanmar radio by Frank Bast, F4LKC in France. On April 20th, 5915. Naypyidaw signed on at 23 UT with a 1 kilohertz tone which lasted 25 minutes. Programming did not start until 23:30 with local songs. And 5985 from Yangon signed on at 2300 with instrumental music, a short announcement followed by the national anthem. The signal gradually disappeared an hour later. There was no trace of Tazin radio on 6165, supposedly also scheduled from 2300. Via AER in Spain, an update about Radio Classic Sunday in the Netherlands will return to the air on April 28th, starting at 08 UT on 6185. Apparently a 2-hour broadcast, and perhaps with a guest DJ. A North American pirate reported by Marshall Reel in Damascus, Maryland, UT Monday, April 22nd, around 0200, on 1620.01 kilohertz instead of the usual Radio Viejo de Cuba on 1620 exactly. They were playing from the soundtrack of the 1939 film Gone with the Wind, which is no longer politically correct. And the following North American pirate I heard might be crossing the boundary into clandestine on 6965 AM, April 21st, at 0104, Voice of the Sons of Liberty, introducing a long program for most of the rest of the hour. For your enlightenment, where goes one, we go all. That, of course, is the motto of the far-right extremist group QAnon. The general tone seemed to be anti-government. Maybe the same thing heard by Johnny Serra in Italy, who's hearing not only European but possibly North American pirates on 6950, April 14th at 23:54 until off at midnight 58. There are also several loggings of this at HF Underground. Last week we had a report about a Russian radar station being destroyed by Ukraine, and now here's another report, apparently a different one since the dates and locations are not the same. This report via Lev in the Shortwave Sites group. On April 17th, container OTH radar came under attack by 2 to 7 Ukrainian drones. The Russian military unit is near the city Kovilkino in Russia's Mordovia Republic. No information about possible damage given at first, and unknown whether the target was the receiving or the transmitting site, which are 15 kilometers apart. Heading either is equally important for Ukraine because it can detect targets all throughout Ukraine, and very important for NATO as well. A source said the radar was destroyed and its repair could be difficult because the companies which built the container were closed down long ago. Roger in Germany forwards more about this from the Kiev Independent. Container over-the-horizon radar is capable of detecting targets up to 3 megameters away. Of course, info in time of war is not exactly reliable. There was a satellite photo of the receiving site with no visible damages, but some of the antenna masts were destroyed. Ukrainian Defense Express said satellite images confirmed damage of the antenna part of the radar, but not large-scale damage. The Russian container still would not be able to perform detection of air targets. Some of the antenna masts were destroyed. The small section of the whole system could be blocked, and the container might still work, says Lev. I am still hearing that roaring blob from Saudi Arabia's defective transmitter instead of any Yemeni programming on 11935, many hours of the day, such as April 24th around 1710. The media magazine you monitor with your mind, World of Radio 2240. A non-commercial service like our website, worldofradio.com. My thanks this week to Mike Newland of Morgantown, Kentucky, who sent some equipment to Glenn Hauser, P.O. Box 1684, ENID OK 73702. One may also contribute via PayPal, not necessarily in U.S. funds, to WORADIO@yahoo.com. Mike Cooper forwards a Reuters report of April 24th. Slovakia's leftist nationalist government has approved a proposed overhaul of public broadcaster RTVS, which it is accused of bias, raising concerns among opposition politicians, reporters, and media advocacy groups. This is the latest step in what critics say is an effort by Prime Minister Robert Fico's government to tighten control over the European Union and NATO member country. Fico, who became Prime Minister for a fourth time last year, after several years in opposition, has long railed against critical media, and his government has refused questions from some outlets. Under new legislation expected to be approved by Parliament in June, RTVS director will be removed years before his term was to expire. Employees at RTVS, which will be renamed Slovak Television and Radio, STVR, said in a Facebook video the legislation could become a tool for a political power grab at the broadcaster. All this, of course, could impact what we hear almost on shortwave from Radio Slovakia International. Frank Bast in France reports hearing the Overcomer Ministry, Brother Scare, on an unlisted frequency, 6150, around 01 UT on April 21st. It has been relayed from Bulgaria and Channel 292, but where else could it be coming from in Europe? It finally cut off at 0500, was one of their transmitters out of order. Then going back and checking his recordings on 6150, around 21 UT, there was an ID for Channel 292. Or it could have been someone else relaying 292. Kari Kallio in Finland suggests a couple of years ago 6150 was the frequency of the mighty KBC. The Voice of Turkey is usually on the air in English to North America at 22 UT on 11785. But it was missing both on April 23rd and 24th. What happened? So on UT 25th, I checked the other broadcast for Western North America at 03 UT, and it was still on the air on 7275, and in the opposite direction on 6165. Something's always erroneous at Emmerlair. Mike Cooper forwards this from the Telegraph UK on April 18th. BBC World Service chief resigns amid deep concern about broadcaster's future. Lilian Landor calls for the service to be protected amid a 500 megapound hole in the broadcaster's finances. It's written by James Warrington. She has quit as citing deep concerns about the broadcaster's future amid sweeping cuts. Lilian Landor, senior controller of BBC News International Services and BBC World Service director, said she will step down in July after 3 years in the role. She said she was deeply concerned about the operational capability of the World Service if additional cuts continue to weaken it further. BBC announced major cuts to the World Service in 2022, leading to hundreds of job losses and the closure of foreign language radio services, including BBC Arabic and Persian. She warned of immense pressures facing the World Service and the BBC more broadly. The organization is operating in a tight and ever-restrictive financial environment. It must be able to retain its distinctive universal voice, regardless of how deeply it integrates into the wider BBC News framework. It needs to continue to be a genuine international public service, capable of reaching people in parts of the world in need of trusted news and information. The comments have sparked fears of further cuts, with one BBC manager describing the situation as really grim. BBC has already announced cuts to services as part of a wider effort to plug a 500 megapound black hole in its finances, following a 2-year freeze to the license fee. Director General Tim Davie last month said the corporation was now trying to find a further 200 megapounds in savings as he announced plans to overhaul its digital services. BBC is also racing to prepare for a future without the license fee after the government launched a review into its future funding model. As for hearing BBC on shortwave, Andy Reid in Ontario says, on April 21st, for the last few nights, there's been little to no audio on 9510 between midnight and 02 UT, although the signal strength is good. That's listed as the Uzbekistan relay site. During certain hours, there is only one shortwave frequency on the air anywhere from BBC, such as 23 UT via the Philippines on 11825. Although it's beamed southwestward toward Indonesia, it's sometimes heard in North America. We have no other choice. But it has changed as of April 24th to 11645, which I confirmed, but certainly not a sufficient signal direct. During the previous hour, 22 to 23 UT, the Philippines relay remains on 9440, hoping that Cairo doesn't come back. A U.S. AGM press release, April 19th, via Mike Cooper. The U.S. Agency for Global Media has named Michael Abramowitz as the new director of Voice of America, currently president of Freedom House, a nonpartisan organization that works to create a world where all are free. Will succeed VOA Acting Director John Lipman later this year. U.S. AGM CEO Amanda Bennett says, Michael is an esteemed journalist and a champion for human rights. Much of his work at Freedom House has informed our own efforts to counter disinformation and authoritarianism around the world. I'm excited for his leadership, eager to work alongside him to bring objective news and info to the world's most restrictive media environments, especially at such a critical point in our global history. As president of Freedom House, he oversees analysis, advocacy, and direct support to frontline defenders of freedom. Previously directed the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Levine Institute for Holocaust Education, led the museum's genocide prevention efforts. He spent the first 24 years of his career at the Washington Post, becoming national editor, and then White House correspondent. Michael Abramowitz himself says, I'm deeply inspired by the mission of VOA to provide accurate, comprehensive, and objective news and to tell America's story to people around the world, many of whom have no alternative source of info. The mission is especially vital at a time when authoritarian governments are flooding the airwaves and social media platforms with propaganda and disinformation. VOA is a bulwark for truth and press freedom. I'm excited to take the helm of this organization and work alongside its talented journalists and staff. Together, we will win the information war. He is a graduate of Harvard College and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. After wrapping up his current duties at Freedom House, he's expected to start his new position this summer. There's also a report about this in the New York Times on April 19th. About World of Radio airings on WRMI, I've confirmed that contrary to what the schedule implies, we are not heard on 9955 Sundays at 10:30 UT, maybe on webcast. Also, the UT Tuesday 0330 on 7780, which lasted a while longer than expected, is now gone. In the NASFA flash sheet, editor Mark Taylor reports on WWCR 7520. April 20th, that's UT Saturday at midnight 47, playing Brain Brothers Radio. That was a pirate who announced it would be starting to broadcast on WWCR. However, it was over already at midnight 51. Alan Rowe has more about Brain Brothers Radio from their website, brainbrothersradio.com. They were planning to broadcast Sunday, April 28th, that is UT Monday the 29th, from midnight UT, on 6905 with retro hits. That, of course, would be a pirate. But also, the same evening, at 9:30 Eastern or 0130 UT Monday the 29th, on WBCQ 7490, retro hits show. He found this about it on FB. Brain Brothers Radio have confirmed their schedule. WWCR was mostly a test, but since they flubbed the first broadcast, transmitting it half an hour late, they decided to stop. WBCQ is an ongoing program time. UT Mondays at 0130, provided feedback we receive warrants it, and also, on occasion, 6905 USB. George McClintock forwards a story from Radio World, April 15th, by FMDXer Nick Langen. WQVR AM is granted construction permit to use HEBA antenna at night. What does that stand for? High Efficiency Broadband Antenna. Thus calling it an HEBA antenna is redundant. It has already been licensed to use it in the daytime experimentally, but the nighttime grant is the culmination of 6 years of research. Worldwide Antenna Systems managing partner Tom Poulos says, we are thrilled to have the authorization of the FCC to validate this remarkable technology. Poulos believes that with its reduced height and no need for a large buried ground system, the HEBA could be a way for AM stations to monetize the current property they operate from, which was the genesis of WQVR's initial partnership with Worldwide Antenna Systems. WQVR is licensed to run 4 watts with its nighttime pattern. Yes, where is WQVR? It's in Webster, Massachusetts on 940. George McClintock adds, You can bet it is not very efficient at RF radiation. There is quite a situation at National Public Radio. Mike Cooper forwards a story from the Wall Street Journal, April 25th. NPR chief defends coverage, accuses critics of bad faith. Catherine Mayer, M-A-H-E-R, says the controversy over news coverage was a distraction. It's written by Alexandra Bruel. When Catherine Mayer joined NPR as its new CEO in March, she came ready to field internal scrutiny and concerns about coverage. What she hadn't bargained for, 2 weeks into the job, was public criticism of NPR from a longtime editor. The controversy has triggered tumult inside NPR's newsroom and thrust Mayer into the spotlight. Critics have scrutinized her political views and seized on past comments she made on everything from the First Amendment to misinformation to the idea that written history is tilted toward the worldview of white men. Mayer said in an interview, all of this, frankly, is a bit of a distraction relative to the transformation our organization needs to undergo in order to best serve our mandate. In an essay earlier this month on the news site The Free Press, NPR editor Yuri Berliner said the network had lost its way by letting liberal bias skew its coverage. Berliner was suspended and subsequently resigned. Berliner took aim at a strategy predating Mayer. It tracked whether NPR stories drew on a diverse range of sources and added more affinity groups for staffers based on identity markers such as race and gender. Mayer said her predecessor's initiatives were necessary but not sufficient to accomplish the goal of reaching more listeners. Berliner said if NPR wants to foster a broad range of views, suspending and then rebuking a staffer is not the best way to go about it. Mayer said she has a robust belief in the First Amendment, and her comments were taken out of context. Ron Howard in California continues monitoring Radio Vanuatu on 7260 from 0615 on April 24th. But there was a problem with the transmitter. At 0701, the audio was lost, but the open carrier remained on past 0925. They had been playing some island pop songs at 0615, and pop songs in English and Bislama at 632. A series of PSAs and promos at 6:58. After a local time check at 0701, the audio cut off during the intro indigenous theme music that always starts and ends the news segments. Photos or scans of vintage QSL cards are often a mainstay of DXer blogs. In the British DX Club, we stumbled across one of Phil Finkel, K6EID in Marietta, Georgia. There's a section, aside from ham radio material, of classic SWBC QSLs from the 1930s to the 1950s. Algeria to the Windward Islands, Liberia, Sweden, Sarawak. It's K6EID.com. There are also pages of other QSL cards, the era from the 1960s to the 2000s. The Propagation Outlook from SWPC, issued April 22nd. Geomagnetic Field active April 26th and 27th, with ANK indices of 15 and 4. Also unsettled 10 and 3 on May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and then down to 5 and 2 starting May 4th. Solar flux descending from 215 April 23rd to a low of 155 April 30th and May 1st, and then rising to another peak of 215 on May 15th and 16th. With many thanks to all our contributors and stations, hoping you'll hear me again next week, Glenn Hauser concluding World of Radio 2240 with a standard disclaimer.